Okay, welcome back, everyone. This is chapter one. Thanks for getting started. You must have done the first Flipgrid video. These slides are going to be annotated. They're from the book. It's a great book on interpersonal communication. What I tend to do with these is I'll chop them down a little bit and kind of add my own pictures. And this is kind of what I guess we would do in class. There's more interaction, of course, but nowadays with this online learning, this is kind of like my little 10 to 15 minute video. I'll try to keep them short, but there's 10 slides each, probably 10, 15 minutes per chapter. So let's talk about chapter one. So as I mentioned in the overview video is, we talk about communication. We all know communication. We can all communicate. Even if we can't speak, we can communicate, right? When you go to another country, you can communicate. So we're going to start off with talking about why do we do it? And if you look here, if you've taken a psychology course, this graphic on the right here should look familiar. It's Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And kind of start putting your college classes together. So read the book, of course, read the book. There's so many good examples in there and gives you a lot of detail, but this is kind of my way to bridge it to what we're doing, right? So physical needs, think about when you go to a doctor or the dentist and they're in your mouth there and they're doing stuff and you can't tell them how much it hurts. So what do they ask you to do? They ask you to put up a finger, right? 10, 7, 8. So we have to communicate for our physical needs, right? Whether it's food, we're hurt, defending ourselves, whatever it is. Identity needs, social needs, practical goals. Again, go and look these up more, but they all make sense. Like, for example, identity needs. To do a quick example, if you look at the self-actualization, people go, what do you mean I need to communicate to figure out who I am? Like, I know who I am. It's sure you do, but how do you communicate that to others? So if you relate this to Maslow, like we'll go to the top one there, self-actualization. When you have enough food and safety and love and you self-esteem, how do you communicate that? So, I've talked to people like, do you spend a lot of your time volunteering, giving things away? How do you see yourself? Or do you see yourself, maybe you're succeeding or developing things? Are you a Tesla person? Or are you a BMW person? Are you an Apple? Are you a Mac? These kinds of things is what you do learn about yourself and you communicate, right? Practical goals, social goals, all kinds of things. Why do you post what you do on social media? Okay, so that's kind of, in a very quick nutshell, why we communicate. Okay, so one of the, I should move my face here if I can. So one of the goals of this course is to learn about communication models. So I'm taking my picture away as you can see this. And this is a linear model. This is kind of what people saw before, right? So I'll go to this next page here. You'll see that this is, when you think of communication, this is the way most of us have thought of it in the past, right? And this is a model from 20s, 30s, 40s. There's a sender, there's a message, there's a receiver. And this makes sense in a lot of ways. When you look back at like radio, for example, the example I use is the War of the Worlds. And was it Orson Welles in the early 1920s? And there was in New York, he's doing a radio show. And what he does is he tells people, oh no, it's right before, I think it's Halloween, right? And you can look this up, Google this. And he just really scares people. Oh, the aliens have landed and they're here. And we only have radio. There's no internet this time. You can't look things up. You can't call your friend. And I think like 10,000 or tens of thousands of people panicked and ran out. And that's because of this very linear model you're looking at here. Orson Welles is the sender, the messages, there's aliens, and we're the receiver. Don't laugh too much because it happened to us. If you remember, it was on my birthday, January 13th, a few years ago. Remember the missile alert? Same kind of thing, right? Duck and hide in manhole covers, whatever. But the sender was, I guess, the state government. The message was that little text we all got, right? Incoming missile from North Korea, and we were the receivers. So when you look at this, it's interesting. The sender, you kind of understand that. Encoding is, if you look at a vanity license plate, what does that one say there at the top for Hawaii? It says, oh, you wish, I think. I don't think it's, oh, wish. Right? So I encode that. What's the message? If you study World War II at all in history, the purple machine there in the middle is what was used to decode Japanese transmissions, and it helped to, well, some say helped to end the war. But they're decoding a message with that message, right? The little rings and cracker jacks, whatever. You're going through the communication process. The channel, we're here doing it asynchronously. You're the receiver decoding. And noise, I put noise there. Look at the static. I think nowadays when you're learning online, this kind of thing, static feedback, that can be noise, right? So that's a linear process of communication. So one more time, it's a learning outcome for the course. So look at this. Remember this, the linear communication model. If you're a parent, I thought of one, we wish, right? When you're lecturing your kids, you're like, I'm the sender, get this message. You got the message, okay? So that's a linear model. The next one is this transactional model. There's another one. We'll just talk about two in this class. Same kind of thing. There's communicators, but now we're adding environments and internal, external noise. Okay, so let's take a look at it here. So if you look at this model, the difference compared to the linear model is communication is simultaneously going on both ways at the same time, right? So even if I'm talking to you and I'm putting my hands up here and I'm looking at you, maybe as you're watching this video, you start to react differently. So that's a little more of a transaction. You have encoding, you have decoding, you have noise here. But what you're seeing is as we talk, as we communicate, there's a transaction going on back and forth, back and forth. It's not just one way, right? So it's kind of hard when you're doing this on Zoom because hopefully people are listening. But when you've been teaching in class, you're lecturing and there's a lot of people, you can see people sitting back. You can see people nodding their heads or wanting to ask a question. So yeah, it's more of a transaction. Where here on Zoom, it's more of a, I guess, an asynchronous transaction. I'm sorry, here on YouTube. So when you look there, that's a difference, right? It's back and forth the whole time. Back to the parent analogy. If I'm lecturing my kids and maybe my daughter's rolling her eyes, I'm getting that feedback. I'm going to change my tone of voice. I'm going to stop lecturing. I don't know, something, right? So that's the difference there. Okay, so another part of our learning goals is to kind of understand some of the principles of communication and how do you apply these. And these are funny because you really do know these already and you've probably experienced them and everything. But here we are in college, we're going to kind of make it a system, put in a system for you, and you can kind of learn about it and talk about it and keep going with it. Okay, so communication principles very quickly. Communication can be intentional or unintentional. So if you look at that one, maybe you don't mean to communicate something sometimes, but you just do. I realized on my background here, I got some instruments back there. I don't know what that communicates to you. You tell me in a Flipgrid video maybe, but I don't know if I intended that, right? I could aim my camera somewhere else. It's impossible not to communicate. I tried to put a background on here, some kind of screen to not communicate. You'll see in my Zoom, I use a Windward background. But no matter what you do, you're communicating something, right? I'm from Windward. I care enough to put something there. I'm not shooting my, I don't know, my bathroom there. Communication is unrepeatable. So this is kind of a fun one too. You think about the first time you went to class, right? Your kids go to class for the first time, or the first time you came to online learning, or with a partner, romantic partner, friends, boss, anything. You can never go back and do it again, right? You tried to, I don't know, get married again, or let's go do the same thing we did, or let's talk about the same thing, or the song we played, whatever it is. It can't be repeated. So even I know a lot of us are sports fans. When the cable goes out or whatever, and it comes back on, a lot of times you don't want to know what happened in a game, right? You'd rather go back and watch the whole game without knowing what happened. So you can't really watch the Super Bowl and get that same thing. You can't repeat it. So those are some of the principles. Here's a few more. Here's the one I think I asked you folks to talk about for the first Flipgrid for this chapter is communication is irreversible. This one's quite profound, I think. And it could, we think about it in negative and positive ways, but it just is, right? There's things like, for example, the first video you watched me in class, and if we were in class, I can never go back now and change things. I can't go back and, say, I don't know, I'm a different person, or I'm not your teacher, change my voice, change my haircut. Whatever your first impression of me is, that's the halo effect, right? For everyone. It's really hard to take that back. So things that are irreversible, we kind of think of like the sticks and stones things when we were kids, but think about as you get older, really positive messages as well. Think about things that maybe teachers or your friend, your partner they've told you that have really helped you and boosted you, right? That can't be taken back as well. So it works both ways, okay? These very quickly, communication has a content and a relational dimension. All this means is the content can be the same, right? If I say no, no means no, right? The relational is how I express it. So if my child asks me, my 11-year-old son goes, Dad, can I drive the car to McDonald's? No, right? Are you crazy? No way you're going to McDonald's. If my boss asks me, Jeff, can you work an extra, I don't know, 10 days this week? No. The relational dimension is really different, right? So the way we say things, that's the relational part of the message. So there's content and relation. So think about the way we say yes and no to different people, right? Different roles. Okay, a few more principles and misconceptions. Here's some misconceptions. These are interesting. More communication is not always better. So sometimes you take a class, or someone tells you you're a great communicator, you're a great talker. You start to think, yeah, I can solve all the problems if I talk it out. I'll be a talker. I'll talk to my friends. I'll talk at work. I'll talk. But sometimes, as you know, a lot of maybe it's important. We're talking about interpersonal communication when you're really close to people. Maybe you just need a break, right? Maybe I can't explain everything to my partner and vice versa to make things. Maybe we just need to just chill out for a while. Maybe not more is always better, right? Meanings are not in words. That sounds really funny, but it's true. The meanings are not in the words, they're in the people, right? So if I say freezing to you in Hawaii, people are like, oh, bro, it's like 60 degrees outside. I'd put my blanket on. I'm like, dude, I live in Colorado. We got like 20 below. That's freezing when your stash gets all crispy, right? So the meanings are not in the word. So think about a lot of things. Think about the word Hawaii, right? Hawaii. Think about China, CCP. Think about all these words out there. USSR, for those of you who are old enough to remember what USSR was, or CCCP, right? But those meanings, those feelings you have are really in you. We kind of agree on a meaning, but they're not in the words, right? Successful communication doesn't always involve shared understanding. Think about that. Think about the times maybe you've met folks here in Hawaii or wherever you are, a tourist from another country. You can barely get by in English, but you're smiling and nodding and giving them directions, and maybe they're asking for the bathroom and you sent them to the closest Zippy's, but that's okay. Everybody's happy, right? So if you don't have shared understanding, that's okay. Think about that again. In a relationship, you don't have to totally agree on everything fits perfectly together. This is what I mean when you can be successful, and we don't have to totally agree on everything. Okay. Last one. This is profound. Communication will not solve all problems. It's not all about communication. There's a balance of everything. Principles and misconceptions. Okay, so we're kind of learning about it. We know the principles, the process. I'm gonna take my picture off here so you can see a little better. Um, Communication competence. This is something like what makes you good at communicating? What is good communication, right? So it's communicating both effectively and appropriately, according to this book. I agree, right? Number one, there's no ideal way to communicate, right? So if you take a speech class, you don't want to speak like Jeff. If that's not you, don't do it. That's not you. Be you. There's not one way, to always speak loudly or assertively or to be quiet all the time. There is no one way. A variety of styles is really can be effective, right? And you don't have to do that either. You can always learn new styles of communication. Think about that in school, right? Your transition from high school to college. How did you sit in class when you were in high school? And then when you came to college, how did you start sitting? How did you learn that? In work, you can learn new styles of communication, right? Before you got your job or your dream job or wherever you're at. Does the way you communicate with your boss evolve? Does the way you write emails evolve? And hopefully it does, right? Competence is situational, so it could depend, right? I might feel really comfortable in a classroom, but say you put me on stage with some musicians, oh, I'm not going to be very competent up there. I'm going to hide in my shell, right? Competence can be learned, though. Say the singer keyboardist is just dancing, going, Jeff, come on, man, get up there, start dancing too. I might learn that from him. So it's very interesting, right? Think about what makes you good under what in what situation, and what can you learn about it. Okay, not bad. I think we're going to make it under 15 minutes. I'll try to make these short. Last slide here. Let me disappear again for a minute so you can see everything. But what makes an effective communicator? Kind of a summary of this last slide, but you got that little theater, the two theater masks there, the yin yang, right? So here, competent communicator characteristics. So you have a wide range of behaviors, right? You can express shock, grief, sadness. The Chinese idea of wu wei, you can express nothing, right? Non-action. Some spectacles happening there, and you're just sitting there super calm. That's a behavior, right? Ability to choose the most appropriate behavior, right? So when you go to a wedding or a funeral, what's the appropriate way to react when people laugh or cry? And also in your personal relationships, same thing. You could be having the greatest day. I don't know, whatever you're doing, you got barreled, you did well in the stock market, whatever it is. Your child got straight A's, and then your friend tells you, their dog died. You have to be able to, right, say, ooh, wow, and kind of take a step back there. And it's not so much performing, but it kind of is, right? You're in this great mood in this other way, but interpersonal communication, help your friend out. Okay, cognitive complexity. This is kind of a hard one. It's one of your terms here. And the example I just thought of is kind of this whole idea of learning speech online, right? A speech course online. I think the typical way we think about it is, oh, that can't be done. Or what do you mean? You can't really talk online, right? And we've been thinking about that, I guess, for years. How are we going to do that? And here we are during COVID. So cognitive complexity says, you know what, let's think about it differently. Maybe it's a good thing for some people, right? There's pros and cons, there's the yin and yang. Cognitive complexity says maybe those who typically maybe wouldn't do very well in a face-to-face speech class might possibly do very well in an asynchronous online course because they feel more comfortable, right? So that's cognitive complexity. And there's a lot of examples in the book, so look for that, okay? Empathy, I think we kind of know that one. A little bit deeper in this one is empathy, is kind of being able to really relate and understand what others are going through, right? Doesn't affect you too much, but we can relate. Self-monitoring, how much do you pay attention to yourself when you're communicating with others, right? Quick example, I used to work downtown in Hawaii, in Honolulu. I go to work at 5:30 in the morning, and there was just this guy down there who was a little bit different, and he'd be screaming and swearing and, and then I kind of realized after a while, like, you know what, he's not all there. And part of me envied that, right? I wish I could go to work inside. I work at Bishop Street, and just, but you don't do that, right? Because you monitor yourself. One of the fallbacks is a lot of us who self-monitor too much. I think the book says this: you miss out on real life, right? You're always worried about, oh, does my breath smell? Am I talking too fast? Da, 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 da. And while you're doing that, you're not part of the transaction, right? Part of the model. You're too worried about what you're writing or what you look like or what you sound like. This last one is commitment. It's really easy talking about interpersonal communication. If you want to get better, right? And that's not, you have to get better, but make a commitment to it, right? When you get upset or you're talking to your partner, or maybe you're trying to become more assertive, we'll talk about later, monitor your nonverbals. Just be aware and make a commitment, try to get better at it. Okay. That's chapter 1. Thanks for listening. I hope it helped you. Always, 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 please read the book as well. Okay. Hopefully I'll see you folks in the optional class on Thursday if possible.